Chapter 11. The Quest for the Holy Grail. Bedivere and Mordred remain in Camelot. And so the Knights of the Round Table left Camelot. "We will seek the Holy Grail for the honour of our king and the glory of God," they declared. Arthur stayed at Camelot with Bedivere and Mordred. All the other Knights of the Round Table set out to seek the Holy Grail. Bedivere was wounded and had the use of only one hand, so Mordred offered to care for him and to serve the king at court. Mordred soon learnt about all the rooms in the palace. He knew all the passages and gardens and hallways. He talked to the ladies of the court and heard all their gossip. He talked to the servants and learned all the secrets of the palace. Months passed. Knights returned to Camelot with news and then set out again in search of the Holy Grail. They searched the kingdom of Logres for news or for signs of the Holy Cup. Some knights never returned. They sought the Grail through dark forests and across wild hills and in deep valleys. They fought with wolves and ogres. Knights fell and were lost with no one to tell their story. "Camelot is empty," Mordred said to King Arthur. "We must not lose the traditions of Camelot. We need young knights who can serve the king, the Round Table and the kingdom of Logres. We need more young knights." Arthur listened to Mordred and made new knights, but the young knights quickly became loyal to Mordred and not to Arthur. Sir Bedivere was silent. He guarded King Arthur and watched and waited. The Grail Chapel in the Wild Wood. Meanwhile, after many adventures, 5 knights came together in the wild wood near the castle of Carbonek. Gawain and Bors met Galahad and Percival, and they were joined by Lancelot. Nacians, the holy hermit of Carbonek, came to them out of the wild wood. "The end of the quest is near. The chapel of the Grail is hidden in the wild wood," he said. "Take King Pelles from his castle. Carry him through the wood, and you will find the Grail Chapel." The 5 knights went to Castle Carbonek, where King Pelles lay on his bed. "I am in great pain," said King Pelles. "The wound that will not heal is painful. You must carry me to the chapel of the Grail." The 5 knights carried King Pelles on their shields. They went into the wild wood and followed a narrow path. The Lady Blanchefleur walked behind them, but she did not speak to Lancelot or Galahad. Only worthy knights may enter the Grail Chapel. Night fell. The knights walked through the wild wood and found their way by moonlight. There were noises in the wood and strange lights and ghostly shapes. At last the knights came to a place where the trees did not grow. A white chapel appeared in the moonlight. "Carry me into the chapel," said King Pelles. "I will be healed there." The knights carried him to the chapel door, but they could not enter. Lancelot, Gawain, and Bors pushed at the door, but it did not open. Then Galahad and Percival put their hands on the door, and the door opened. Percival and Galahad carried the wounded king into the chapel. The Lady Blanchefleur entered the chapel with them, but Lancelot, Gawain, and Bors could only watch from the doorway. They could not enter because they were not worthy or pure enough. The third vision of the Holy Grail. The light inside the chapel grew brighter. Percival and Galahad carried the wounded king to the altar. Music could be heard from above. It was the music of angels singing. Then 3 women, dressed in white, appeared in the chapel. The first woman carried a spear, the second woman carried a dish, and the third woman carried a cup that was filled with light. They carried the spear, the dish, and the cup to the altar. Galahad went to the altar. He took the spear and handed it to Percival. "Heal the king's wound with this spear," he said. Percival took the spear and touched it to the thigh of King Pelles. The wound was healed at last. King Pelles sighed. "I have been the guardian of the Grail for many years," he said. "Now my wound is healed, and my task is ended." I hand this task to you, Percival. I ask you to care for the chapel and my daughter. Now I will rest." Then King Pelles fell into a deep sleep and did not wake again in this world. Percival took Blanchefleur's hand, and they looked at Galahad. Galahad drinks from the Grail and passes from this world. Galahad took the Grail from the altar and raised it to his lips. He drank from the cup, and the light grew brighter. The roof of the chapel opened, and the light of heaven shone down. Galahad looked upwards and put his hands together in prayer. Then, as the others watched, Galahad rose up into the light. Those who saw this sight were filled with peace and joy. Then, when the light faded and the music ended, the knights took the body of King Pelles outside. They buried the king at the door of the Grail Chapel. The Guardians of the Grail Chapel. Percival did not return to Camelot. He married Blanchefleur and became king of Carbonek. Percival and Blanchefleur guarded the chapel of the Grail, and sometime later they had a son called Lohengrin. Lancelot, Gawain, and Bors returned to Camelot and told their story to the court. King Arthur was filled with joy by the story of the Grail. "This is the greatest achievement of our knights," he said. "This story will be told for as long as men tell stories, and while men tell this story, Camelot will never end." But Lancelot did not tell all the story. He did say that he could not enter the Grail Chapel. He did not say that he was unworthy. Mordred smiled an evil smile and looked at Lancelot. Lancelot turned his eyes to Gwyneth.